Good evening. Welcome to Domination Submission Radio. My name is Mike Mackay, and I'm your host with the most DS, BDSM, kink, and fetish talk on Blog Talk Radio. We've got a great show for you tonight. We are going to be talking about switches. And if you are someone who would like to comment on that or has a question about it or just wants to tell us what you think, then you can call us at 347-857-1862. Let me give you that number one more time. You know you're going to call me. 347-857-1862. I keep trying to get that number to spell something, but it just doesn't work, so you're just going to have to deal with it. We also have a chat room where you can visit us and tell us what you think in print. You can, if you're a little shy about calling us and asking your question or making your comment, feel free to do it in our chat room. If you see the chat room but you can't seem to talk in it, it usually requires you to be logged in with a free account at Blog Talk Radio, so you might consider doing that. I'd also encourage you to check out our website. The website is domination-submission.com. domination-submission.com. There you'll find our Facebook, Twitter, and other social media. By the way, I've been shut down by Twitter, suspended temporarily for being an aggressive follower. Go figure, a dominant being too aggressive on Twitter. Anyway, we've got a great show ahead of us, and I'd like to introduce my co-host, who is the author of the Trust in Me series of erotic fiction and about to release another novel called Becoming Stone. LB Shaw. How you doing, LB?
I'm doing good, thanks. I know how you're doing, so I won't ask.
For those of you who don't know what she's talking about, I have a book that's about to come out in just a few days, and just realized that my 287-page book is now a 587-page book and needs to be reformatted, but it'll still be out in just a few days. It just means I won't get any sleep. It ought to be an interesting weekend ahead. So how are you feeling, LB? You've been sick. Are you better now?
Oh, yeah, I'm much better. I'm just like you trying to crunch out another book, a short story, but other than that, I'm doing really well.
Super. You excited about this topic?
I am. I've got some things to discuss, some opinions and thoughts, and some personal conversations or whatever that I've had with my husband about it. So, yeah, a very broad topic. I think we have lots of things to talk about. I
think so, too. We also have a special guest tonight who's going to stick around for at least half the show or so, and that's Lolita Sin, an up-and-coming fetish model and a person whose opinion we value greatly. How are you doing, Lolly?
I'm doing pretty well. Sorry to hear about the book craziness.
Welcome to my life. Hey, I got something for you, Lolly. Listen to this.
Lolly, 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 get your efforts here. Lolly, 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 got some efforts here. Come on down to Lolly's, get the efforts here. You're going to need it to write or read or even think about it. Lolly, 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 get your efforts here. Got a lot of Lolly, Jolly efforts here. Anything you need and we can make it absolute.
You know, I've had that damn song in my head for like days, and now it's everyone's problem. That song it's what they call an earworm. Once you get it into your head, it's like impossible to get out. So,
yeah, thanks.
I substitute bad words here, so it's lolly, lolly, lolly. Bad words here. Misery loves company. Enjoy, folks. All right, let's kind of dive right into our topic. And our topic tonight is switches. And for those who are completely new to the lifestyle and may not even understand what a switch is at all, a switch is somebody who is able to, at will, change their role in either their DS or BDSM orientation when it comes to domination submission. Does that sound like a good definition to you guys?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I think a little bit of clarification is necessary, but, that's a good start.
Okay. Well, yeah, we're going to do a lot of clarifying over the next hour or so, but I think it's a good place to start as well. So a lot of people don't realize that switches have historically experienced a little bit of a negative bias in the lifestyle. They've been traditionally misunderstood for a lot of reasons, and probably the most basic reason is that the lifestyle it's a domination and submission lifestyle. A switch doesn't fit into that black and white dichotomy that a lot of people expect when they think of the lifestyle. And well, let me just put it this way: I've spent decades trying to figure switches out. It's only recently that I think I even have begun to really understand where they're coming from. How about you guys? LB?
Yeah, I guess, first of all, I would like to say that I had heard the same thing when I first started doing research for my writing, but I had heard the same thing, that they were kind of looked down upon or maybe frowned upon, and a lot of people tell them, you need to make up your mind. I guess they're perceived as fence sitters, and personally, I don't think that just because you enjoy polar opposites of something that means you can't make up your mind. They actually tend to get kind of defensive and say, well, I have made up my mind. So, yeah, I think that, also some people are probably a little bit insecure about it, or maybe they aren't sure if they're a switch and that sort of thing. But the way I look at it is sometimes you want to drive and sometimes you want to sit in the passenger seat. Sometimes I want Nutella on my banana and sometimes I want peanut butter. It's just, I don't know. I personally don't think that I could switch, or I certainly couldn't dominate a man. But, I understand that there are people that have the capability of filling both roles.
When you said Nutella, I was expecting sandwich to follow that, not banana. How about you, Lolly?
I actually had a pretty similar experience as LB. When I was first getting into the lifestyle, I kind of had the impression that switches were just sort of freelancers, I guess, and not really a serious part of the lifestyle. And, it wasn't until somewhat recently that I delved a little bit deeper. I was definitely guilty of looking down on switches as a less serious or less credible part of the community. But, a lot of people sort of associate it with you can't have your cake and eat it too. But I like LB's analogy, variety is the spice of life. You sometimes want Nutella, sometimes want peanut butter, and that's okay. It just depends on what your taste buds like.
Well, part of it is the fact that we want to think of these things as opposites. Domination and submission as two opposite things, and they're really not. They're really two ends of two versions of the same thing, if you want to think of it that way. It's just like light and dark aren't opposite things. They're simply graduations along a spectrum. You have more light and less light, but they're really the same thing, right? They're just a matter of degree. And domination and submission, I think, are similar. We often think of them as opposites, but they're really not opposites. No more than, well, this is probably a bad analogy, but you can be a mother. LB, you're a mother. You have a daughter.
Sure.
But you also have a mother as well, right? And
right.
When you take your daughter to visit your mother, you can be both a mother and a daughter at the same time. These are not opposites. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I get what you're saying.
Also, I think it's very analogous to being bisexual. There are people who treat bisexuals with this same negative bias. They're going like, why don't you just make up your mind? You should either be hetero or you should be homosexual, but this bisexual thing is you're just confused. And that's not necessarily true. I think it's a lot more similar to what Lolly just said. It's sometimes you want to have your cake and eat it too. You don't have to make up your mind, quote unquote. I'm making little air quotation marks here that you can't see. Yeah, but even so, even people who've been in the lifestyle a long, long time, and I have been my entire life, I probably spent half of my life trying to figure out switches because I have a hard enough time understanding submissives sometimes. Because in my mind, I know no other way to be other than a dominant. And understanding the submissive mind is enough of a mystery to me. Understanding somebody whose mind is able to comfortably occupy both ends of that spectrum really confused me for many, many years. And it's only recently I've become a little bit more comfortable with that, I think. But there are a lot of different kinds of switches and different ways of looking at it, and I'm hoping that some of our listeners tonight will call in and enlighten us. So if you're listening right now, if you are a switch or you happen to be involved with a switch or you are about to become a switch, whatever, call us at 347-857-1862. We want to hear what you have to say on this subject. I got a story about this. You guys want to hear my story?
Sure.
Oh, don't all jump up at once. Heck. Well, okay. This is kind of where I realized that I really didn't understand switches as well as I thought I did, and this was a few years ago. I had a very good friend, a dominatrix, I guess is the best way to put it. She was always training new submissives, and we became friends, and we were always talking about the entire process of training submissives and mentoring them and bringing them along. And we got to become very good friends, and we knew each other for years. And I considered her a very good dominant, very, very good, and very bright, very smart, a lot of fun. We were kind of, kindred spirits in a tiny club of dominants who enjoy training submissives. And this went on for years. And at one point we were talking, and I'm, having a nice cold beer and some chicken wings, and we're talking about all sorts of things. And after a couple of beers, she asks me, Mike, why is it you've never considered taking me on as a submissive? And I literally, spit out my beer. I started choking. I was like, what are you, even now, I even think about it. I go into this choking mode. I probably needed to be Heimlicked or something. But come on, Elby, you'd Heimlich me if I needed it, right?
Of course I would.
How dirty.
Everything I say sounds dirty. I don't know why. Anyway,
I'm in a dirty mood. Admit it.
I was literally flabbergasted. I was speechless. And when I'm speechless, something's seriously out of kilter. There's a disturbance in the force when I'm speechless. I just went, what do you mean? You're a dominant. And she's like, no, I'm a switch. I thought you knew that. And even now,
you hit it well.
I'm like, okay. Seriously, it was one of those things. It was an epiphany for me, not a personal epiphany about her as a person being able to do both things, or what it was an epiphany for me that I didn't really understand switches as well as I thought I did. Does that ring true with either of you guys at all?
Yeah, I think we were talking about this yesterday, and you had said something about, I think I had asked you if you saw that switches were more common in women, and you said that you thought that it was, and it makes sense to me because I think a lot of women, I don't know how to phrase this exactly, but without sounding sexist, but I think in a lot of ways women have been repressed for so long, and even today, still dollar for dollar, we don't make as much money as men do typically, and I think women probably feel a sense of, maybe they feel empowered when they can assume a dominant role in their professional life, but when it comes time to having intimacy with their partner, they want to fall into that submissive role. I don't know, it's just kind of a thought of mine, but maybe they don't necessarily show that submissive side to people because it might be a sign of weakness to them.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Lolly? Have you ever had that epiphany where oh my God, I really don't understand these people as well as I think I do?
Yeah, absolutely. A very, very good friend of mine, she goes by Wicked Blue Glow. She is a switch. And before I met her, I had this sort of high and mighty, I am a true submissive or I'm a true slave. I'm better than any switch because I actually commit. And it wasn't until I met her that I realized that someone can go both ways. As we've been saying, somebody can go both ways as a bisexual person. And there are definitely different ways to be a switch. But any way that somebody chooses to do it, I think it has a place. I don't know, I'm digressing a little bit. I'm not really sure where to go from here.
Well, I think that's a good segue into what we're going to be talking about for the rest of the show. We're going to talk about the different types of switches, and by that, let me just hint at what I'm talking about here. There are DS switches and there are BDSM switches. A DS switch is able to switch between dominant and submissive. BDSM switch is able to switch between a top and a bottom, and those are very different things, so we'll talk a lot about that. And we will take some questions, including questions from the chat room, email, and other venues. One of the questions that we will answer after the break is this one. This comes from my friend Cheeky Geeky, and she asks, I gave myself the awesome title of a baby dom, which is a baby girl dom in training. I think that fits a category of a switch, kind of. But when I'm topping, am I a switch? Am I a top? Am I a dom? And how would the bottom be in that scenario? Dom, slave, switch, or pet? How would that person address her? Think about that while we take about a 1.5-minute break. You're all listening to Domination Submission Radio. I'm Mike Mackay. My co-host is LB Shaw. My guest tonight is Lolly, Lolita Sin. And we'll be back in just 2 minutes. to Domination Submission Radio. My name is Mike Mackay. My co-host is LV Shaw. My special guest tonight is Lolita Sin, a.k.a. Lolly.
Lolly, 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 get your efforts here. Lolly, 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 got some efforts here. Come on down to Lolly's, get the efforts here. You're going to need if you write or read or even think about it.
Okay, anyway. Like I said, misery loves company. If it's going to be stuck in my head, it's going to be stuck in your head too. So let's ask LB and Lolly what they think of this topic. We're talking about switches tonight, and you guys had a chance to think about Cheeky's question, which I will go ahead and restate for those who might not have heard it before the break. Cheeky, who asks this question: I gave myself the awesome title of a baby dom, which is a baby girl / dom in training. I think it fits the category of a switch, kind of. But then when I'm topping someone, am I a switch, or am I a top, or am I a dom? And how would the bottom address me during such a scene? What do you guys think? LB?
Personally, I think that if she's topping someone, as far as the first question, I think it would depend on the nature of their relationship, of the person that she's topping. So I would say that if she's topping someone who's normally a dominant to her or dominant to someone else, it's probably going to be a lot different than when she's topping or she's a dom to someone who's always submissive.
Lolly, lolly, lolly.
I think it really depends on the dynamic. You know, if you're just topping somebody within the confines of play, that's going to be a lot different than if you are actually a dominant to a submissive. And, you know, there are things in between there that can go either way as well. My personal opinion is that if you're topping somebody, you are a top. If you are a dominant to somebody in a relationship, you are that person's dom. And if you are capable of being a submissive in any context while also having a dominant disposition, you are, by definition, a switch. So, you know, it really just depends on who you are with and in what context.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, you know, I have mixed feelings about this, and this is part of the frustration that I've felt over the last several decades with switches, and that is, it's one thing to want to have your cake and eat it too. It's another thing to try to be two things at one time. That can be really not just frustrating and confusing for everybody else, but it can be really difficult for you personally if you're trying to do two things at one time or try to be two opposing things at the same time. And so I think it's kind of useful to classify switches into a couple different categories. And I think the first two categories, well, there's three really, but the two main categories that I like to classify them into is whether they're a DS switch or whether they're a Bdsm switch. A DS switch is somebody who can switch back and forth between being dominant and submissive in their relationship dynamic. And by relationship, I mean somebody that you love or you live with or that you're married to or you sleep with every night. So, but of course there are people who love and marry and sleep with more than one person. So you might have, for example, you might have a woman who has a husband who she feels 100% submissive towards her husband. He is the lord and master of the house. But they might also have a pet in the house, another submissive in the house. This woman we're talking about is the alpha submissive, and she's 100% dominant towards the pet. And so she's not wavering, but she's not trying to be both to the same person. Does that make sense? She's not being dominant and submissive to her husband or dominant and submissive to her pet. She's submissive to her husband, dominant towards her pet. And they make a nice, happy threesome in the house. And there's nothing confusing about that. There's nothing mutually exclusive about that. In fact, it works out really well in most cases when you have that kind of an arrangement. But on the other hand, you might have a Bdsm switch, and a Bdsm switch is obviously somebody who can switch back and forth between being a top and a bottom. And remember, top doesn't have to be a dominant, and a bottom doesn't have to be a submissive. So that person can switch. It could be as simple as somebody who likes to both spank and be spanked. That makes them a switch. Okay? And while you're being spanked, you're a bottom. While you're doing the spanking, you're a top. But you can't do both. It's really hard, not that I've tried, but it's really hard to spank and be spanked at exactly the same time. I assume it can be done, but it's probably pretty complicated. Does any of that make sense to you guys?
I just want to say something quickly. When you say DS switch, or when the first thing that popped in my head is like a vanilla marriage, because I'm thinking, a lot of married couples in the vanilla world, they do share those roles, and not necessarily in an egalitarian sense, but the husband might be dominant in some parts of the marriage and the wife might be dominant in other parts. But you're saying that it's usually there are 3 people involved in that situation. Is that correct?
Well, it doesn't have to be. That was a very simple example and a way to be able to sort it out in your head pretty easily. It's really easy to imagine this woman being submissive to her husband but dominant towards the other submissive in the household. It's easy and it's uncomplicated. And for people, it can get really complicated and it can get really convoluted. Trust me, been there, done that. But the point is, we got to be able to separate those things out in your head, so that when somebody says I'm a switch, you kind of focus in on that. You say, okay, what do you mean by that? Does that mean you switch in your relationship dynamic? You switch about how you feel about your partner or partners? Or does that mean you switch in terms of, sometimes you like to swing the flogger, sometimes you like to have the flogger swung at you? It's a simple way to separate those things out. And then, of course, people have their preferences. So you can be a switch, you can be a top-heavy switch, you can be a bottom-heavy switch. You could be a dom-heavy switch or a sub-heavy switch. Just because you like both doesn't mean you like them both equally or get the same amount of joy from both roles. Or you could be all 4, literally. Like I said, it gets really complicated in some people, but that doesn't really mean it has to be completely beyond the realm of understanding.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's worth mentioning that there is such a thing as a service top, and that's a very important concept when thinking about switches, because if you are submissive and you end up topping somebody, you may be coming from a different place when you're topping them. You may be doing it because the other person enjoys it and you get enjoyment from their enjoyment, kind of a recursive nature there, I guess. Or you're a top because you just enjoy being dominant. I think that disposition is very, very important when dealing with switches.
Yeah, I agree with you. The service top, for folks who are unfamiliar with the term, a service top is somebody who performs in the role of a dominant or a top at the direction or urging or control of a submissive. So in other words, let's say you're a submissive and you are married to a vanilla guy and you think, I really would like it a lot more if he were a dominant, so I'm going to turn him into a dominant. And so every day you teach him a little bit more about how to be a dominant, and he becomes your pupil in a sense. You're training him. You're a submissive, training somebody to be a dominant. Well, that's almost a contradiction in terms, but it happens a lot. And what you end up with is a dominant who's taking direction from a submissive, which makes him not really a dominant. He becomes a service top. So that's what that means. And what Lolly said is exactly true. In a sense, you're both becoming switches, because on one hand, here you are a submissive who's in charge of a dominant. That kind of makes you a switch. And here, on the other hand, here you have a person taking direction who's acting in the role of a dominant, which kind of makes them a switch as well. So you got 2 switches now. So it gets complicated. Never fails to get complicated. So, and the other category, the big category of switch that I like to talk about is what I call a provisional switch. And what that, in my mind anyway, and in my book, I write about this at some length. And that, what I say is that being a switch is an expression of preference, I think. It's not something that somebody who has never done anything just wakes up one morning and says, I'm a switch. Usually what it is somebody has gotten involved in the lifestyle, and they see a lot of fun things going on around them. They say, I want to try that. And so they try this, and it's fun. They try that, and that's fun. And it really doesn't matter that it might be something that a top does or something that a bottom does. It might just seem fun to them. They look around, they see, hey, I'd like to be tied up today, or hey, I'd like to see how I am at swinging that flogger. Well, one of those is a bottom activity, and one of those is a top activity. So suddenly they start thinking of themselves as a switch. And there's really absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I think that there's a little bit of a danger that people who have a very limited number of experiences, a very short period of time in the lifestyle, who haven't really experienced a lot of different things, jump to the conclusion that, okay, I've tried this once, I've tried that once. One is a top activity, one is a bottom activity, so therefore I'm Switch. I don't think that necessarily holds true, and so I tend to believe that true switches are people who have had a chance to be around the lifestyle for a relatively long period of time, have tried a lot of different things, and can state a definitive preference or non-preference, but at least they can say for a fact, okay, I'm definitely a Switch. I like both of these things equally, and I've tried them all, and I've done it for a long time, and it's not like I'm going to change my mind. Whereas somebody who's been in the lifestyle 2 weeks, chances are they're going to change their mind as time goes on. You think that's accurate, Lolly?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. With experience comes change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about you, LB? Does that make sense to you, LB? I mean, you're kind of new to the...
It makes sense. Yeah, and it does make sense, and I agree. I was reading about this whole concept of, what's it called, sexual fluidity, and I can't remember the other term, but that our sexuality changes over time, too. So I think, and also people, when they're new to the lifestyle, want to try a lot of new things, and sometimes they don't really know where they fit in. And interestingly enough, I'll share a really quick story. When my husband and I, not long after we started dating, he used to talk about wanting a mistress. And I knew exactly what he was talking about, even though I wasn't really familiar with a lot of terminology. But I remember just being really intimidated by that because I knew that there's no way. I'm thinking he wants me to put on a corset and the heels with the riding crop and the paddle. And it really kind of intimidated me because I don't think that I could do something. I mean, I could do it. I could learn how to do it, but it would be really hard for me because I'm not a dominant person in any area of my life. Even parenting is hard for me sometimes. I mean, I have a hard time telling people what to do and controlling people. That's just something that's very difficult for me. So I guess I kind of went off.
This is a distinction that a lot of people fail to recognize, and that is you can be very good at something and not necessarily be that thing. There are people out there...
Or enjoy it.
Yeah, or enjoy it. There are people out there who are really good at being a top, very skilled, have years of experience at it, but that's not where they derive their joy. That's not where they find their happy place. That's not how they define themselves. And so, again, I think that comes right back to the whole, are you a DS or a Bdsm switch? You could be a Bdsm switch, which means you do it all. You do the top stuff, you do the bottom stuff, but which one, where do you find your happy place? Which one brings you that joy? And somebody in the chat room just asked, how could you be a top and want to be spanked? Well, or a dominant and want to be spanked. And it happens all the time because guess what? Spanking...
Sadomasochist.
Yeah. Maybe you like pain. There are masochist tops and dominants. And so you could be a diehard dominant. You could be a very experienced top, but guess what? You enjoy pain. And they are completely different things. They really are. One is a sensation, a physical sensation, and the other one is a paradigm, the way you see the universe. And so they're really different things. And so it can be mind-boggling at times, but it is something that you should be able to ponder without, twisting your brain up into pretzel shapes and stuff. We're going to take another break. You are listening to Domination Submission Radio. My co-host is LB Shaw. My guest is Lolita Sin, and we'll be back in about 2 minutes. is Mike Mackay. You're listening to Domination Submission Radio. My co-host is L.V. Shaw. Our guest is Lolita Sin, who has to leave us soon. We hate to see you go, Lolly.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't want to go.
Well, you're going to come back often, right? We like having you on the show.
Oh, absolutely. I like being here.
Super. So, you got any parting words for us before you lolly off into the sunset?
Well, I am on Twitter, I am on Tumblr, I am on Instagram, so come find me. Lolita Sin, that's Sin with 2 N's.
Super. I like Sin with 2 N's. It's my favorite.
I bet you do.
Right. Well, thanks so much for calling in, Lolly. I appreciate it a lot.
As always, thanks for having me.
All right. Bye-bye now.
Okay.
Bye.
All right. Isn't she fun, LB?
She is fun. I like her.
I do, too. Okay, we have a caller in the queue, and this is Pony Toast, my favorite kind of toast. I don't know.
Not with Nutella?
Yeah. No, that's with bananas. So, are you there, Pony?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Pony.
I'm friends with a young woman who is new to the community, and she's gotten into a relationship with a master slave, and she's in a triad with them. And she's talking to me about her relationship and such like that. And she's a sub to the master, and she's a sub. She's not a slave. But when she talks to me about the stuff that she's told, she's being misinformed of various things. She's being treated like a slave and being told that that's normal sub behavior. And the most concerning thing was today when she told me that they've been dating for about 2 months and they do not use safe words, and that they do the living the lifestyle 24/7 thing, and that they've never had negotiations. And I'm concerned.
Okay.
And I don't normally get involved in other people's relationships because that just causes issues. But if you're in a situation where you feel that someone else may be in a concerning situation, what is the best thing to do with that?
All right. Let me tell you what I think. And I'm going to put you on hold, but I'll bring you back on to see if we've answered your question, okay?
Okay.
All right. Let me just say, first of all, that we have to be really, really careful in this lifestyle about making assumptions regarding other people's relationships, because we really can't see what goes on behind closed doors. We really can't. And so it's really, really, really easy to assume things that aren't necessarily really happening. Here's the other thing that we have to be careful about in this lifestyle, and that is putting BDSM standards on DS relationships and vice versa. And by that I mean, remember, DS is about the relationship dynamic. It's about how we express our love for somebody, how we live under the same roof with somebody, how we relate to them. Whereas BDSM is how we play with somebody, how we spank them or get spanked or those kinds of things. And so you really can't assign standards from one genre to the other. And by that I mean, for example, a safe word is a BDSM thing. It's not a DS thing. In 35 years of DS relationships, I have never had a safe word. But then again, there's never been a need for a safe word, because there's no possible way that I would ever ask somebody that I love dearly to do something they don't want to do. And so the mere hint, that look in their eye, just that look in their eye is, oops, I don't like this, I would stop. I don't need a safe word. But that's because this is not a BDSM thing. It's not, and that person is not a stranger to me, and so I don't need that. We didn't need that. Now, anybody that I'm playing with outside of a relationship, absolutely, you got to have a safe word, because you don't know that person very well. You can't read their eyes the way I can read a submissive who's been with me for years. And so when that person, that stranger, or even a friend or somebody you play with all the time, when that person is in a great deal of pain or fearful or having a panic attack or whatever, I might not pick up on those cues, because I'm a play partner. I'm not a life partner. And so, yeah, in that situation, you absolutely want to have a safe word. So I think you got to be careful about applying the standard from one lifestyle to the other lifestyle. And I think you also really have to be careful about assigning the word abuse to just about anything in the lifestyle. Abuse, one person's abuse is another person's absolute joy. I've had submissives ask me literally to pound 10-penny nails through their nipples or to use giant safety pins to close up their vagina. I politely but very firmly said, no, thank you. That's not really what I'm into. And in my mind, that's abuse. But in her mind, that was a fun Saturday night. And so you got to be really careful about projecting your definition of abuse on somebody else's relationship, because you really never know what's going on, not only just in the relationship between those individuals, but what's going on in that person's head. It's very, very common for outsiders, particularly vanilla outsiders, to look at your relationship in the lifestyle and go, that's abuse. The two people in the relationship could be thinking, well, this is the happiest we have ever been in our entire life, and don't you dare call this abuse. This is what we want. This is what we enjoy. We love this. It gives us joy. It brings us fulfillment. And so who are you to say this is abuse? All that having been said now, you can't stop feeling concerned about your friend and worrying about your friend. But some of that worry may be due to the fact that you are looking at a DS relationship and applying a BDSM standard or vice versa. And I think that might be a little bit of what you're doing there, because once somebody becomes involved emotionally, relationship-wise, with in a triad, for example. I've been in many triads, and to be honest with you, it is my preferred relationship configuration. Those things are complicated. They're really complicated. And, it's real easy for somebody outside of it to totally misinterpret what's going on at times. Really easy. And so, it's one thing to be concerned. I think you should definitely express your concern, Pony. And I think that you should be there as a friend if your friend ever finds herself in a situation where she thinks she's being abused. And let's face it, she's going to be the only arbiter of that.
It's not even that I think she's being abused, because I'd never think about bringing that kind of a thing up. When I talked to her about it, and I voiced my concern about it, her thing was that she doesn't want to bring it up to her dom because she doesn't want to feel like she's a bad submissive. And my thought, at least what I was trying to tell her, was that, at least in my view, if you can't come to your dom and ask a safety thing or voice a concern that there's a problem,
something's wrong,
something's wrong. So that's where most of my concern came from. Wasn't even what was going on, because I know that people's views on things and the way that they structure their relationships is their own business, and it may be different from the general accepted rules. But I think more of my concern was that she told me that she was in a position she was afraid to talk to him about it, because she was afraid that it would make her a bad submissive. And she's very new to this. She's been doing this for only like a couple of months.
That was going to be my next question to you, Pony, and that was going to be, I'm assuming she's very young at this and very new at this, because that sounds exactly...
She's very young.
Yeah. That sounds exactly like the kind of behavior you typically see in young submissives who are new to the lifestyle, and they are willing to put up with damn near anything because they don't know what's right and what's wrong. They don't know what's acceptable, what's unacceptable, or what's supposed to be happening. So whatever happens, they just think to themselves, okay, well, I guess this is supposed to be the way it is, and they just go with it. And that's a very, very dangerous attitude to take for anyone, much less...
I agree.
The best thing I would recommend in that case is, do your best to be a good friend and educate this person, and just let them know tactfully that relationships are all about the give and take. It's about communication. It's about getting what you want out of the relationship. If you're going into it and you're just afraid to speak your mind and get what you need out of the relationship, and somebody's just taking, then that's not really a relationship. That's called exploitation. And
right.
So that's all you can do. The bottom line is, especially if somebody's, head over heels in love or whatever, you're not going to be able to change their mind. All you can do is kind of educate them and hope that they learn without getting really hurt somehow. Make sense?
Yeah, and she had come to me today, and she had said that she had talked with the wife in the relationship, and had said, I'm interested in, I'm curious about these safety things and about safe words and stuff like that, and that the response had been, have you been talking to someone? Like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
and that is also typical behavior of somebody who's afraid that you might actually find out from other sources that they don't know what they're doing. It's typical behavior of new dominants, for example, to try to isolate the submissives from the rest of the community, because the rest of the community will tell her the truth about him, and that's not what they want to have happen. So, yeah, those are very good points, and best of luck with your friend, and check in with us often. Let us know how that goes. I appreciate it. All right, take care. So, what do you think, LB?
Yeah, that's when I hear no safe word, I think consensual non-consent. But I don't know. I think that if she's in a situation where they're playing or scening and she doesn't have a safe word and she's too afraid to speak up, that's probably not a good situation to be in.
Well, again, this really depends on what's going on here. Whether these are just like I said, we can't see into their bedroom or their head.
Yeah.
And so we don't know really if this is a BS relationship or if this is just a matter of BDSM play partners. And if it's just BDSM play, there needs to be a lot more negotiation and understanding and safety protocols put in place. If it's a relationship, maybe not so much, because you have your life to work all these things.
It depends on what they've worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. And, of course, she's still new. We don't even really know if this person's really a submissive. It's really easy, again, as we said earlier in the show, it's real easy to try something and go, oh, I like this, so I must be this, and you've never tried anything else, so how do you really know?
Mm-hmm.
So, again, whenever I hear stories about people who are really new to the lifestyle, new to these kinds of relationships, and still kind of feeling their way through, there's nothing wrong with that. Not a thing wrong with that. I just worry that people, hey, I've been in the lifestyle 2 weeks. I know all there is to know about it, and and it's not. They don't. I've been in the lifestyle 35 years, and I still consider myself an idiot about so many of these things.
Yeah.
The only reason I know some of this stuff is because I've made these mistakes, sometimes over and over and over again, and it's embarrassing to admit it, but it's true. And some of these mistakes are really easy to make. And on that note, we're going to take another quick break, and then we'll wrap the show up. You're listening to Domination and Submission Radio. I'm Mike Mackay. My co-host is LB Shaw, and we'll be back in about 1 minute. My co-host LB Shaw, and you're listening to Domination Submission Radio. We're talking about switches, and that song really makes me want to go to Mexico. How about you, LB?
I always would want to travel. Mexico, maybe. Depends on where.
Beach. Anywhere there's a beach.
Yeah.
I'm ready for some beach action.
Good.
Been working on this book for 6 months. I'm ready for the beach. All right. Yeah. So that was an interesting question. I kind of enjoyed talking about that, even though it was kind of off topic when it comes to switches. It really isn't, because again, anytime you're talking about people who are kind of new to the lifestyle, it's real easy for those people to believe that they know what they like and they know what their preferences are and they know what they're doing and their partners know what they're doing, and none of that may be the truth. You just never know, and it's kind of sad sometimes trying to get people to understand that, especially a novice sub who almost by definition knows everything, right? And
some do.
Yeah, it can be rough.
And you got people like me. I don't know anything.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. You know, the people in this lifestyle are the best people in the world as far as I'm concerned. They love teaching. They love mentoring. They love taking others under their wing. And there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I really don't know anything about this. And people will just fight over the chance to take you under their wing and teach you things.
Yeah.
It's those people who have last week didn't know what BDSM stands for, and this week they're an expert. Those people drive me crazy.
Right.
And everybody else in the lifestyle as well, because in the end, it never ends well for those folks. And, of course, they blame the lifestyle and everybody in it. And it's never the fault of the person who simply assumes they know everything about it. Yeah, it's very frustrating and sad sometimes. Yeah. But hopefully with things like this show and our books and good people out there who are willing to spread the word about the lifestyle, I think maybe we can make a little bit of a difference. So, switches. What? Any closing thoughts on that, LB?
I was going to share something that I read today on one of the forums. I won't say which one it was, just to keep it as anonymous as possible. But it was a person who identifies as a poly by switch, and I just got a kick out of what this person said. They said, not because I'm indecisive, but because I'm greedy. And I just thought it was kind of funny, but I thought you might appreciate that.
That's kind of profound. I might just steal that. Yeah, you know, again, I don't think being dominant and submissive are necessarily mutually exclusive. I don't think they're opposites in any way, shape, or form. I think it really just boils down to where you happen to be on that sliding scale. Some people are in that ultra-dominant end of the scale. Other people are in that ultra-submissive end of the scale. And pretty much everybody else is in the middle someplace, that mass of that 80% who can do both. And that, when we're talking about vanilla society, that describes most people. Most people are able to draw on their inner dominance and their inner submission as appropriate, depending on the situation. That is normal. I think where we might tread on shaky ground is when we start labeling normal people outside of the lifestyle as being switches. Anytime you start putting a BDSM or DS label on a vanilla person, you turn it into something that it's not, and you dilute the meaning. And I don't think you do you do something of a disservice both to the vanilla community and to the DS and BDSM community. So we want to be careful about that. So we have been talking about switches. This is Domination Submission Radio. My name is Mike Mackay. My co-host's name is LB Shaw, and we hope you will come back and listen to us again next week. Bye-bye now.